Hey everybody, I am actually out here on a really early, very chilly spring morning, and I'm actually in a rural part of Indianapolis, actually north of Noblesville, just kind of out there away from everything to talk about tornadoes just a little bit, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Indianapolis or where I'm at in the rural areas of Indianapolis or any of the surrounding metro at all, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video. Now, we get people reaching out to us from all over the country with, of course, questions about Indianapolis and what it's like to live in Indianapolis, different areas and cities, towns around Indianapolis, and of course, about tornadoes in Indiana. So if you have questions at all about any of those things, then don't hesitate to reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back whenever it comes time for you to make your move to the Indy Metro. So again, I am actually well north of Noblesville right now, kind of out in a rural area. As you can see behind me, it's just maybe a few houses here and there, but farms and farm fields and all that, and it's a pretty chilly spring morning right now. It's in the 30s, and actually it's very breezy, so it's not super comfortable standing here, even though the sun is shining pretty nicely and kind of frying my eyes, to be honest with you. But I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about tornadoes. And of course, the Midwest is known for having tornadoes. And it's never really occurred to me before to really ask that much about them, because I'm from Indiana. I'm born and raised in Indiana. I've lived in Indianapolis, at least some part of Indianapolis in the area, since 1997, but I was born and raised in Evansville, Indiana, which is a city way to the south. It's along the Ohio River, pretty close to Kentucky and pretty close to the Illinois border as well. So kind of down in that tri-state area. And living here, it's just been something that happens in the Midwest and nothing I've really given that much thought about until I've started talking with people over the years who are moving to Indiana, and they ask quite often about tornadoes. So again, it's never really occurred to me before, but I guess that would be something if you live in a state that really doesn't experience tornadoes at all. It seems like Indiana is a state that gets a lot of tornadoes, or it's something that we have to worry about really quite often. And I have to say, it's never really crossed my mind before, because Indiana, sure, we get tornadoes, but it's not something that if you live here, it's gonna be on your mind all the time. For one, they really only occur during a certain part of the year, and that's really in the spring. They can happen in other times, definitely. They absolutely can, the possibility is there, but tornado season is really kind of close to when this video is being shot, in very early spring. So when you get into, let's say, late March, early April, mid-April, late April, all the way into May, and even into June, that's kind of tornado season. And there's all kinds of scientific reasons why, and this isn't a scientific video, but I kind of nerd out on all this stuff and love it. But in order to get severe storms, you have to have hot, wet air rising. And hot air is less dense and lighter than colder air, and that's why a hot air balloon can float. But all winter long, the atmosphere above us is getting very cold, and then finally, the atmosphere is extremely cold from winter, but in the spring, we start to get warmer, wet air moving off the Gulf of Mexico up north through the country, and that warm, wet air rises very easily into that cold atmosphere. So you get this warm, wet air coming up from the south, you have this colder air from the north, and where those two meet, it can get really stormy. And that's gonna be a difference between two different air masses. That's a front. So that is the time where the most dramatic difference between the two air masses can occur. Now, of course, that can happen in the summer. It can happen actually in the winter too, but usually, at least in the winter, you don't get tornadoes associated with it all that often, especially around here. But it's never really occurred to me that much, because it's just kind of been a way of life. It's something that we just don't think about. They happen from time to time around here. But if you were to live, let's say, in California or a place like that, to me, earthquakes are more terrifying, because they can happen at any moment, any time of the year. There's no earthquake season where more happen and less happen like you do with severe storms and tornadoes, or something like hurricanes even. Those terrify me more than tornadoes do as well, because they're so much bigger, they're so much more destructive. Of course, the season is a little bit different. They happen in the fall because it takes all spring and all summer to warm up the ocean to the point where that kind of storm can actually occur. So you don't have them in the winter, you don't have them in the early spring. usually in just hurricanes, period. They just don't have warm enough water yet until you get to the fall. So it's the opposite of that for tornadoes. But when you start looking at the statistics for tornadoes across the country, we do get them, and we are really kind of considered the border of Tornado Alley. But the state that gets the most tornadoes is Texas, and it's right along the Gulf of Mexico. Some of that colder air, of course, can make its way down to Texas, and it's meeting that warm, wet air from the Gulf of Mexico right there. So that's one reason Texas gets more tornadoes than any other state in the country, but also Texas is really big. So there's more opportunity for tornadoes there too. It's just geographically huge. But as you go further north of Texas, you get into states like Oklahoma, Kansas. Big surprise there, Kansas. I mean, have you seen Wizard of Oz? Fun. So we know tornadoes happen in Kansas. You get into Nebraska, you get into South Dakota, North Dakota, and even a little bit to the east, places like Louisiana, Alabama, and you go a little north of that and finally get into places like Missouri and Iowa. They all are more part of Tornado Alley proper than what Indiana is. As you get a little further east, even into Illinois, Illinois has on average really more than twice the number of tornadoes that Indiana has each year. So you get into Indiana and we're really only averaging about 20 to 30 tornadoes a year. And you might think 20 to 30 tornadoes a year, that is nuts, absolutely crazy. Well, the reason I'm out here in rural Indianapolis, really north of Noblesville, is just to show you, hey, this is where in the country where most tornadoes occur. They happen out here in the open. And the reason for that is because statistically, most of the United States doesn't necessarily look like this, but it's at least open or it's not populated. It's rural. So that could be mountainous, it could be desert, of course, although tornadoes aren't really happening in the desert, but different landscapes, but it's open. It's not a dense populated area. Now that doesn't mean tornadoes can't happen in a dense populated area. That is absolutely something that can happen. You know, places like Dallas, Texas, and other cities in Texas, and Oklahoma, Kansas, Illinois, Missouri, even Indiana. Tornadoes have hit populated areas, but it is so exceptionally rare. They usually hit bigger, more unpopulated areas because there's just more of them. So 20 to 30 tornadoes a year actually isn't a tremendous number. And it's not like you go so many days and have a tornado, so many days have a tornado. There's a tornado season, and it's usually just 4 or so months long where the conditions are absolutely really good for tornadoes, and they can happen kind of in clusters. So you can get a bad storm system that comes through and multiple tornadoes could be produced by that storm system. But most of them, again, happen out here. And usually, most of them are really quite small. So if you're familiar with the Fujita scale, it's the F scale, so you can have F1, F2, and different grades in between there. But usually they're quite small, and the F1 range, they may touch the ground and they don't last very long. They may be on the ground for just a few seconds, but that counts. That counts as a tornado, even though it doesn't do any damage to a populated area. So yeah, we can have them in areas that are populated, but most people really don't think that much about them. And basements, I've had people ask, well, is that the reason why you have so many basements in Indiana? And basements are actually really quite common here. And the reason they're common here is not because of the tornadoes or the storms, although they're pretty handy if you do have a severe storm. You can go down into the basement. It's going to be one of the safest places in the house. The reason basements are more popular here in Indiana is because we can have them. You can't put basements into homes in, let's say, the Bay Area in California. It's just too dangerous. Earthquakes certainly disrupt your basement or crack the walls and do some serious damage. Earthquakes here, exceptionally rare. And the ground that we have here is conducive to having basements. And basements usually, especially in the last 20 years or so, extremely well designed, exceptionally rare for them to leak. And the water management systems for water trying to get into those basements is fantastic. So take the water and you drain it away from the house. So we have basements because we can have basements, and it's a really inexpensive way to add square footage to a house. So you can take, let's say, a 2,000 square foot ranch house and make it nearly 4,000 square feet by putting in a basement, and that is actually a very inexpensive floor for the house. You don't have to have a roof for it. It already has the level above. The walls are going to be different. It's relatively protected from the elements on the outside, given that it's underground. Actually, even keeping it warm or cool during the summer and winter is really pretty easy, given that it's underground. It's just a really nice, inexpensive way to add square footage to a home. So that's the main reason that we have basements. just for that. But when some of those severe storms come through, we can get in that basement and be a little bit safer. You will see, even though, like I said, tornadoes are really fairly rare here in Indiana. I'm 47 years old at the time of this video, and I've never seen, and lived in Indiana all my life, I've never seen a tornado with my own eyes. I've definitely been through some really nasty storms, and especially hailstorms. Hail is more of a danger here in Indiana than tornadoes really are, because hail can be really destructive. It can be destructive to, obviously, exterior structures like your roof. You can get an entire roof so damaged that it has to be replaced just from hail. So when severe storms pop up, we can definitely get some hail, and that's what I'm more worried about than tornadoes, but you can huddle down in that basement. We do, though, have a storm warning system, and a lot of places in the Midwest have storm warning systems. So you'll see just in different areas of the city, around Indianapolis, around where I'm at here in rural Noblesville, in the north side, south side, east side, west side, these towers, not really a tower, but a pole that has a siren on it. And when you get up near these things, they're going off, it is ear-splitting how loud they are. And they're supposed to be that way because they need to get that sound out as far as possible that an approaching storm is something that you might need to take cover for. So those will go off during the spring and summer from time to time when we have severe storms, or there's a tornado warning. So on radar, a tornado's been indicated, or a funnel cloud has been seen, or there's a tornado on the ground. And usually they give you some warning that it is coming or potentially in your path. Honestly, usually by that time the storm sirens are going off, you already know something's happening. You can see the sky darkening, you know a storm is on its way, maybe you hear it on the radio, you see it on TV, or just like I said, you see it with your own eyes that it is on its way. So we know a severe storm is coming, and the sirens are there just kind of as a warning backup that you might need to be a little bit concerned about this one. 11 o'clock on a Friday, and that's usually when they test these sirens. There's one right behind me. Woo! Those are loud. So Friday, 11 o'clock, usually they test them. You can hear them all over Indianapolis. Again, I'm in Noblesville, not in the exact same places out in rural. This is a little bit closer to where some homes are, but you can see the siren spinning, maybe on this video, up around that post. And when it faces this direction, it is loud. So it's meant to be that way, so you can hear it if you're in your house or in your car or something like that. So tornadoes, Indiana, yes, they do occur. Is it something that you should absolutely be completely worried about? No, I don't think so. I mean, they can occur, they probably will occur when you're around in Indiana, just not something that is going to be so terrifying and so frightening that you'd want to shy away from a place like Indiana, or really the entire Midwest for that matter. If you want to move to Texas, if you want to move to Illinois, if you want to move to Iowa, if you want to move to Kansas, they're going to be there, but not something that should probably deter you from doing so. So if you have questions at all about tornadoes, maybe not the science of tornadoes, I know a little bit about it, but you might want to look elsewhere for that. But if you have questions about tornadoes in Indiana, weather in Indiana, or anything about living in Indiana or Indianapolis specifically, then make sure that you reach out. And until the next one, we'll see you later.